hear you. Can everyone hear Joe? All right, great. Well, Joe, thank you for joining us today's session. It's going to be a fun and exciting session, listening to your journey and story and what you've done in the past few years. So without further ado, guys, today's session is going to be in English. The first part is a talk by Joe. And please leave all your questions in the chat box toward the end. We dedicated a good half hour, 45 minutes for it. If you want it in Russian, we have our colleagues here who will translate that and have your question provided to Joe. So Joe, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello to everyone. If it's okay, I won't turn on the camera because it often gives connection problems and things like that. So we'll just do audio and also what we have on the screen. And maybe at the end I might turn on the camera, but I always think it has bad, whenever I do a webinar, it brings bad luck. Whenever I turn on the camera, suddenly things stop working. So that's what I'm going to do there. So I think I'm with you for about 90 minutes, if I'm correct. Anyone can correct me if that's not correct, but I think that's usually what it is.
That's correct.
Yes. So the first 45 minutes, I'm just going to talk a little bit about me. I'm from Ireland, and we always say that people, if you don't tell people who you are, people won't listen to you. It's a sort of a question. Why should I listen to you? Who are you, and why should I listen to you? Is something we say in Ireland. Who are you, and why should I listen? There you go. So because of that, I'll just talk a bit about who I am and my background. And then maybe I'll give some lessons learned in the 4 years that Hot Hotels has been in the App Store, and we've had the app. A lot of those lessons will actually be just as much about startups as about apps. Very many of the problems we've encountered were more to do with how to run businesses and generally applicable things rather than the specific technology that is an app. So I'm going to cover that. And then I'm going to talk about current issues in apps. Really this kind of debate between mobile first, mobile only, mobile native, and now AI. So it's actually quite interesting based on the competition last year and the lessons we've learned. I from the judging, one of the things I learned was that a lot of the entries weren't using the full capability of mobile technology. They were doing things that could be done maybe equally as well through other channels, and certainly the teams that I was impressed with were people who were doing stuff that really took advantage of what's different and interesting about a mobile. So I'm going to be stressing that very much. The second part then is really questions and answers, and again this comes from this notion of I don't know who you guys are, so I don't know how I can help you, and on that basis, it's good to devote at least half the time to questions and answers. Also, the webinar format allows that, because you can just type an answer and everyone can see it, and it's not like being in a classroom where you have to catch people's eyes and you worry about your voice and microphones and things like that. So that's really what we're going to do. So very much questions from you and how I can help you guys. I can talk about a lot of things. That's not ever in doubt. But the question is, am I talking about what you want to talk about? And the only way we establish that is if I'm answering your questions. Maybe just if anyone, one of the participants just wants to sort of write in the chat box just where they're from and what their app does just while we're going along, and that will help me start to think about ways I can be useful. So if anyone wants to go ahead and just say, hi, I'm Andre, I'm in Ukraine, and I have an app that does something, or something like that. If anyone wants to go ahead and do that, then please do that, and it'll help me as we go along. So first I want to say, or at least I want to repeat this question about a webinar meaning questions. And this is a really important point to have to make always, which is that a really good webinar is better than a face-to-face experience. And I want to talk about what you want to talk about. So, in that sense, you need to start shooting me anytime you want questions. So whenever I'm talking, you don't have to be polite. You don't have to wait. The grammar doesn't have to be perfect. You can say really whatever you want. And then if I'm answering a question that somebody once asked, I always feel much better about that. So just to, I can't really make that any clearer. The other thing is what's called the learning pyramid, which is that how people learn is not about listening and reading. Our listen to a lecture is one of the most inefficient ways in which you learn. And the most efficient way to learn is this idea of teaching others. So in other words, if I'm going through a subject and someone has specific experience of something that they did that worked really well, then that person should go ahead and write about it. I'm not here to sort of be the only person transmitting expertise or anything. In many cases, you guys will know more about a subject than I will. That's just naturally the way things happen. So just make that point very strongly, that when you start to explain something, that's the way in which you're learning. That's the 90%. So the more interaction we have, the more questions, the farther away from 10% will be, and the nearer will be to 90%. So I can't really make that any clearer. I've said it at the start, I've said it on a slide, and now I've explained exactly why. So it's absolutely crucial that you engage if you want to learn something from this. It's utterly been my experience that sometimes you wait and you miss your opportunity. And entrepreneurship is about nothing if it's not about embracing opportunities. So as we say, Idar is just talking. That's perfect, Eldar. That's exactly what I want. You just tell me where you're from and what you're doing, and that will help me if I can think of an example as I'm going through. So if everyone can do what Eldar has done there, that would be really useful. So let's talk a bit about Hot Hotels and me. So Hot Hotels, we are a mobile-only app to buy last-minute hotel rooms. It's very simple. We don't do much more than that. But as I'll talk about when I start to, in the later half of the seminar, I'll talk about exactly why we've kept the model very simple. Simple models are models that scale. So we invest a lot of work into things like usability as opposed to adding on, connections with taxi companies or anything like that. We believe that, mobile is the biggest thing to ever happen to technology, and that travel is the biggest industry in the world, so that there's a business in there somewhere. We're going about 4 years. We've raised over 2 million we've raised about 2 million in venture capital, which has brought us to profitability, and we've no interest in selling any more of the company. I'll talk a bit about why we took investment if anyone is interested in that. But we are very much we are a mobile only last minute hotel booking app, and the idea is that a lot of our competitors are still web-based companies. They're companies that begin on the web and that have a lot of expertise in the website. A lot of things like search engine optimization and that kind of stuff. They have a lot less expertise on web and how to really on mobile, and to really understand the power of the mobile. So the idea is that if something happens in your day and you suddenly need, your plans change and you suddenly need a hotel in a hurry, you can book that hotel with the functionality of sending a WhatsApp message. the thing, I guess the secret what we have is that we on a lot of days we sell a lot more through third parties rather than through our app itself. I mean, when we started, it was app only. In other words, the only way you could get a hot hotel room was through the app, but then we connected with an API. So we now sell through Kayak, through TripAdvisor, through various Skyscanner, to various bigger apps. And that's one of the biggest issues that apps face, which is that what's called discovery, which is that most people's phones, they only have about 20 apps that they use regularly, and they all head towards the big apps. So one of the biggest problems we have is trying to get discovery and telling people download your app. So what we really use app is that our regular customers, in other words, once somebody books with us, we can then send them a message to say, oh, download our app and you get even better rates. But generally the way we acquire customers in the first place is through TripAdvisor, Trivago, Skyscanner, Kayak, one of those companies. So somebody goes on there, and we use machine learning, and we use advanced ways for us to show very high up in their what the customer sees, and then they buy an app through hot hotels, and then we can upsell them and then tell them to buy the app. So that's generally the way we do it, and that model works reasonably well. We get a lot of repeat. Imagine, people traveling and that kind of thing. They want our app, so that's kind of what we do. And then we use an API out and then we also use XML in, which is how we get the hotels in the first place. So we have a very lean model in that we don't try and reinvent anything. We try and use technology that already exists. So, XML means that we can get hotels from existing sources. We don't have to input all the data ourselves, and it's automatically updated. And then an API means that we can connect to other apps, which is extremely useful because those are the apps downloaded by most people. So that's kind of our model, is to try and be a very open kind of model. A lot of our immediate competitors are very app only. They don't sell to third parties. But that's the kind of choice we took. So if I was to summarize sort of what we've done, first thing is the idea of open, the idea of using an API to sell to third parties and using an XML to get hotels rather than doing it ourselves. That's a really important issue for us. And let me see, what else would I say about it? So let me, I can talk a bit more about hot hotels, and if you have specific questions, you can of course talk to me about it, and of course you can download the app yourself if you want. So this is just a picture of the founders. So that's me on the extreme right, beside the guy in the beard. That's what I look like. So there's two of us are from Ireland and two of us are from Spain. But we're based in Marbella in the south of Spain. So that's where we do a lot of our development. We tend to bring good techies, good smart techies in from other countries, and Marbella is a very good place on the south coast of Spain to attract people. People are like the idea of coming there, and it's a good place to attract and also to retain talent. So that's us. And in terms of where we are, currently, I just took this from our database today. We're in 55 countries and 300. So, every day is different, and the algorithm, spits out different things. But we are, you can see that purple. We have covered a lot of the globe. I mean, that's not an inconsiderate amount. Spain remains our biggest country, with the USA after that. And then we are strong in Europe, but that's probably because of our price point rather than anything else. We tend to have our price point is to sell €150 hotel for €75, and particularly like the high 3-star, low 4-star. So while our immediate competitors tend to focus on 5-star and tend to focus on making luxury affordable, we tend to focus much more on the practical issues of just finding a bed, someplace that's central and has need, which hasn't too many complications. That's very much the It's very much the European way of doing things rather than America, which is about making luxury affordable. So that's sort of what we do there. In terms of the trajectory of the company, we spent a summer in the Techstars Accelerator in Boston. We were the first ever Spanish company to be accepted by Techstars, and in my opinion, Techstars are one of the two best accelerators in the world, the other one being Y Combinator. So we were the first company from Spain ever to be accepted by Techstars in the USA, which was quite a big deal. And we spent the summer in Boston, last summer in Boston, and it was a very good experience. If you can make it in Techstars, you can make it anywhere. They're very their criteria are very tough, and they tend to they don't accept sort of that you don't make progress. They really push you to make progress, and they really tease apart your business model. And also, Boston is the center of travel technology for the world. Even more so than in Silicon Valley. Companies like TripAdvisor are there, IIT are there. They're a Google company, Zipcar, Kayak, of course, is there, and Lola, which is the new offshoot of Kayak. So we found an awful lot of expertise in travel technology in Boston, and also we found a lot of expertise in things like machine learning and big data analysis. Due to the universities there, which is something that was really important for us. So that was quite a good step for us to spend. If nothing else, you feel you're up to date. You feel as if you kind of know what's going on in the world, and that's extremely useful. So that's sort of our story in terms of hot hotels. So I'll kick in then into lessons learned. Any quick questions on anything I've covered so far on hot hotels or anything like that? If there is, shoot them into me now, and I'm happy to answer them, because when we get on to other areas, we mightn't have so much time to go back. So just shoot that in there. Okay, so I'm looking at Eldar. We're making a platform which allows businesses and leisure travelers to use the services of multilingual people. Okay, interesting. So that's, again, you could almost say that that's a mobile travel company as well, if you think about it. So on lessons learned. So the first thing is this one, which is quite stark, which is to say that just because you're building an app, your initial status, the reality of what you're doing is that nobody cares unless you create value. You've got nothing, and there remains very much an attitude that, I'm building an app, this is cool or something like that, when the reality is that you should begin by being honest with yourself that if you don't create value for people, then it's just a hobby. There's nothing meaningful or useful in it. So you're starting something for the 6 billion population of the world, but your starting point should be, I have to do something of value, or then I don't justify getting anybody's attention. So I think about this cartoon a lot. Every time I'm sort of thinking about exactly where we are and where we need to go, and that's my beginning start. That unless we create value, unless we do something that is useful, then we don't have the right to anyone's attention. The default option is 0. I would urge you guys to read Startup Failure Postmortems. Not all of them are about apps, but the really great thing about it, it doesn't matter where you live now, you can get access to information in a way you couldn't before. So this is absolutely, maybe 166 is a lot, but definitely startup postmortems are quite useful. People are generally honest and genuine with what they say, and you'll recognize an awful lot of the problems. And a lot of the startup postmortems will also tell you, we knew this and we should have been honest with ourselves. So in your case, that would be an opportunity to be honest with yourself and to really find out why more people aren't downloading your app, more people aren't transacting. So postmortems, almost all of them contain those words, which to say everyone was telling us, but we thought we'd know better. Well, that isn't always the case. So startup postmortems are a good thing to read. I mean, obviously they can be a bit depressing rather than being inspiring, but they're very necessary. So make sure at least somebody is reading what those are. And then why startups fail. And you can start to see, it's got a lot to do with the business model not viable. I mean, in a way, running out of cash is the same thing. In other words, you didn't have a viable business model, you didn't have enough customers, and you ran out of traction. So that's why, the really important thing you have to do is to work out what your business model is, and to find a viable one. We're going to look in a moment for definitions of business models and viability and areas like that. But this is the number one reason why startups fail, which is they don't have the right business model. They're not doing something that is necessary to exist or to have. And that's a pretty important. I mean, it seems like an obvious thing to say, that if you don't have a viable business model, you'll go out of business. But time and time again, I've seen people who weren't obsessed with finding a viable business model. And you have to be. You have to be obsessed with finding a viable business model and to do every form of experimentation you possibly can to try and find out what that is. So again, you'll see other issues as you go down that list about various possibilities as to why things went wrong. And of course, you have the outlier, which is to say, if team harmony wasn't good, then maybe people wouldn't be inclined to talk about it. And that's fair enough. Some people could say that. Some of the other things in there, people aren't exactly going to admit to them. But I think in general, and in my experience, the reason that startups went out of business was they didn't have a viable business model, which is why this is literally what you have to spend your time doing, which is to try and find out a viable business model. I did some videos, and also the Liz Fleming, who you might see at the screen, of the 6 pictures at the bottom. I'm in 2 and she's in 2. And we recorded some videos which go into maybe very much a beginner's guide to apps and what to do and things like that. So those were all recorded, and you can go take a look at them on YouTube whenever you want. And there's some aspects of what's in there are things I'm going to repeat here for you. But even so, if you want to see the rest, and if you haven't got tired of my voice, you can go and look at that. So that's on YouTube in the EU Mobile Challenge area. Now, these 2 definitions are pretty important, and you need to think in terms of what you're doing. One is by Steve Blank, who's a very famous. He's sort of the guy that came up with this idea of you needed to experiment a lot before you scaled. So he describes a startup, which is what an app is, as an organization, as a search. That's the big thing. That, remember I said that companies go out of business because they haven't found a business model. Well, that's what you need to think in terms of a startup. A startup isn't, you don't have to get everything right from the beginning, but what you have to do is not get everything wrong. And that's some of the things that he found. He found a lot of startups that they found things that could get them some traction or some attention or some sales, but not something that was repeatable and scalable. So that's what you need to think. Is your startup searching for a repeatable and scalable business model? Because that's what it's supposed to do. Another definition of a startup is from Eric Ries, who came up with the Lean Startup. He's a former student of Steve, and he loves this word uncertainty. And this is an important thing, that startups have extreme uncertainty. So if you expect anything else, you almost shouldn't expect anything else. That's the way startups are. Startups are hashed under conditions of extreme uncertainty. So uncertainty is the norm, and some people would say it's even your friend. That uncertainty allows you to compete with companies in a way perhaps that others wouldn't. So those are kind of the quite important things for you to take away with you, that what you're trying to do is find a repeatable and scalable business model, and also that you're living under uncertainty. So if you the idea that you need everything right from the beginning that's just dreaming. That isn't really going to happen. So this phrase has become, I'm sure, well, I don't know for sure, but at least some among you, I expect, would know the minimum viable product. And it's, it's sort of, the term is used, but like a lot of terms, not everyone fully understands exactly what it means. So what you're trying to do in a minimum viable product is find a product with the fewest number of features needed that users are willing to pay for. Now, that isn't, that's quite a profound explanation, but at the same time, it's something that you shouldn't ever lose sight of. How can you, I'm yawning because I'm staying up late. It's the problem with running a startup. You don't always get to be safely in bed at night at 9 o'clock. You generally end up 2 in the morning solving customer problems. But anyway, I'll continue. Although I may need to get a Red Bull in a few minutes. Anyway, so minimum viable product. So that's quite an interesting idea of something, again, that you have not to lose sight of. And Reid Hoffman says, if what you launch is you're not ashamed of it, then you've launched too late. So really focus on, an app in this case with the fewest number of features, yet people are still willing to pay. That's that's quite an important kind of a definition. So, and then breaking up the definition slightly into the key 3 words: minimum, viable, and then product. So the idea of minimum, first of all, is the least amount of effort required to offer value. So it isn't, doesn't necessarily have to be something that you spend a lot of time working on, as long as it offers value. If you can have just something very simple that offers value, well, that's minimal. Viable is that it has to be, what you're trying to do with a minimum viable product is collect information on user behavior. Obviously, you want to be selling something, because by selling something is a way of tracking user behavior. Nothing indicates success like when a user buys something. It's like the ultimate. Users can look at something and download something and these kind of things, but when a customer actually buys something, that's a real sign that you've done your job properly. So in that sense, what you're trying to do with the MVP is trying to set up an app that will allow you to learn about what works and doesn't work. So it isn't necessarily about the money. It isn't about bringing in as much money as possible, but it is about is allowing you to find out what works and what doesn't work, and to play with that. Finally, product. I guess that really means that it just has to be something that can be bought and sold. I'm a huge fan, where possible, of having something for sale. That if a customer wants to give you money, they can give you money. I know there are products that they resell data and things like that, and yes, they are a product as well. But I find customers buying something is a supreme act of confidence in what you do. And also, this is reinforced at the end, whereby there's something serious when you ask for money. People, if you think about it, maybe some people are too nervous to ask for money, and clearly taking money brings responsibility, and it also brings, you have a lot of things you have to work out with the bank and things like that. So it isn't, it adds complexity for sure. But, this quote here is, customers took us more seriously when we started asking for money and started having feedback. It's like a way of testing whether people are serious or not. So, where possible, you should try and take money. It sort of brings clarity as to whether what you're doing has value or not. Sometimes you can fool yourself that it does when actually it doesn't. So this idea of simplification, is quite important, and it ties in a bit with the next one, the next phrase, which I'll go on to in a second. But this is quite, this is quite profound, and also a kind of a lesson I want you to take away with your MVPs, which is to say, you dramatically overstate the number of features you needed. Some apps can be just getting a feed from somewhere and putting that feed in there and nothing else. So, his experience, and also the experience I found, is that people overestimate how many features are needed in an MVP. it's minimal, it's viable, and it's a product. So what you really need to do is, what's the minimum stuff? So sometimes you don't have to have that many screens. Sometimes you just keep it really, really simple. And if you've any doubt as to whether something should be there, it probably doesn't need to be there. That's probably a voice telling you itself exactly what's there. And this is a line from actually a children's book, which is to say, it's a famous maxim of coders, where the idea of, like, there used to be a time when, like, things had more value when they were longer, whereas coders have now switched to this idea that something is better if it's shorter, because you've reused an awful lot of components, and then that will make it a lot faster. So this is from the book The Little Prince, and he's sort of saying that perfection is not when there's nothing to add but nothing to take away. So again, that's quite profound, and I emphasize that to people again and again and again and again. They don't always really fully appreciate it, and sometimes I have to send them to look at great works of art that are, Mondrian and these kind of guys, where their paintings are really, really simple. Not everyone has to be a Van Gogh. Not everyone buys that. Not everyone likes that. So just keep what you're doing really, really simple, and anything you have a doubt for, it can be taken away. Next thing I'm going to talk about is the minimum viable product itself. I just need to, one second, just need to get a drink of water. I'll be back in 10 seconds. Okay, I underestimated how good my voice was. So anyway, I'm back, and so this is the minimum viable product. And there's kind of two famous diagrams when you talk about minimum viable product. This one and also the next one. Some people find this one easier to understand. Other people find this one easier to understand. And if anyone is asking about the slides, slides are available to anyone. Slides, I'll just type that. Slides available to all. So if anyone has any difficulty getting them, I'm more than happy to add them. And I imagine there'll be a link perhaps after the webinar, which will be sent out, which will give you a link to where to download them. But there's utterly no problem in making the slides available, so don't worry about that. Slides available to everyone, EVERYONE, everyone. There you go. So this is the minimum viable product, and you want to try and contrast between the two things, where, in other words, if someone puts all their effort in just to the functionality and doesn't include reliability, or doesn't include usability, or doesn't include human factors, then that's not a good minimum viable product. You have to have, obviously, you're trying to minimize what you're trying to do, so you want the minimal functionality possible, and the minimum reliability, but there must be some, there can't be none. I mean, if the thing has loads of features but keeps crashing, then it's kind of useless to everyone. If the thing has loads of features but it's impossible to navigate because usability is rubbish, then it's not really much good either. And even emotional design, things like logos and things like that, just reassuring you that this thing has some credibility is quite important. So what you don't want to do with minimum is just think of the functions and kind of strip everything away. Yes, you want to work out what functions you need to have, but you also need to have the other aspects. Something needs to be reliable, not break. It needs to be usable, means that you have to make sure you can test it. And usability testing is actually quite easy. You only have to ask a small number of people, and generally they'll pick up usability areas. I mean, 5 people very often make a huge difference to your app, and the number of people that don't show their app to other people. And all you have to do for a test is just sort of give them the app and say, okay, well, book a hotel room, and sort of see what they do. And it's again something that's easy to do, but not a lot of people do it. So that's the first thing about the minimum viable product. And again, at any time, questions at any time, just type questions at any time. So so this is kind of the first thing to understand about minimum viable products. And the second thing is the idea that a minimum viable product, what you're not trying to do is build what you want to build in stages. In other words, if you contrast, the top, which is often described as a Ferrari, what you don't do is have this dream, which is where you want to get to, and then just try and establish bits of it along the way. Like each of the things you try to do should be able to keep the function of what you're trying to do individually. In other words, if you're building you're building a transport, something that wants to do transport, you start with skateboard and then to a bicycle, or then to a scooter, then to a bicycle, then to a motorized scooter, then to a car. So each of those will work as standalone applications. They aren't just sort of something along the way. And that again is a huge mistake people make it's a huge mistake people make all the time about their minimum viable products. So they have this kind of dream where they want to get to, and they just build it in stages. And then, of course, they never learn about experimentation. And that's the thing I'm going to hammer and hammer home, that the app and the minimum viable product is experimentation. It's learning what you need to fix and getting customers to make decisions as to what's working rather than you having to do them yourself. Peter Drucker said, customers, this is, let me see, I'm testing my typing speed, D-R-U-C-K-E-R, customers rarely buy what companies think they are selling to them. So, what I'm saying there is that very often the first idea of what you have and what you think your product will be useful for, when it actually hits real customers, very often customers will say, no, I wouldn't use it for that, but I would use it for this. And Twitter was a great example of a service that grew very good by having user feedback. And some people would say that their problem started when they stopped listening to users. So that's the minimum viable product. So just a quick recap: minimum viable product. The minimum you can have that a customer will engage with in order to tell you what is working and what is not. What you're trying to do is experiment and trying to find out what works and what doesn't work, and taking away things that don't work and adding things that do work. You're likely, as a first-time entrepreneur, to overestimate how many things you need. And if there's a debate as to whether you need it or not, you probably don't need it. Perfection in design is taking things away, not adding things. So there's nothing wrong with having something like famously the Google homepage that had only search. So while Yahoo were filling it with like all sorts of news items and things like that, Google stayed with just the search box, and that was a good decision. And there are other examples of good design aspects that were kept very simple, and because of that, people knew how to work them, and they used. Then the minimum viable product. You can't have just functionality. You also need to have reliability, in other words, and you also need to have usability and emotional design. You can't just have sort of functionality and nothing else. Minimum viable product is not your dream product built in stages. What it is, in fact, is a series of steps along the way which achieve what you're trying to achieve in limited ways. In other words, this idea of being good enough. So that's sort of the end of the minimum viable product phase. So now we're going to talk a bit about mobile, and some of this is a bit strategic, but it's actually in many ways more important based on some of the other things that I saw last week. It was quite interesting to see the companies that from the Euro Challenge last year, that they weren't using the full technology of the they weren't using the full technology of the mobile. And if there's one thing I would really want to try and emphasize, it's the idea that you have to use the full technology of the mobile. I'll talk about what that is in a while, but it's not just like a PC in your pocket. A mobile is a lot more than that, and you really need to understand that. This is the 16 mobile theses, which is it's a podcast. I appreciate not all of you guys are native English language, so I mean I find it much easier to listen to other languages rather than to read them. If someone asks me to read 40 pages, I won't, but I will listen to a podcast because I find those interesting. So this is a very good podcast where you can actually try to understand what's different about mobile and try and really understand what has changed. So it's and he talks about 16 things, including famously that the technology industry is all about the mobile. That's basically, you can't separate the technology from the mobile. And also, this presentation is Mobile Eating the World, and it's a sort of it accompanies the podcast. So it's well worth going. It's only 76 slides, and he talks a lot about what's different about mobile and what opportunities lie. So it's he writes one of these every quarter, and I think this is his latest one. So very important. And one of the slides in it is, if you had to give me just one slide to talk about a presentation, and I've given on occasion entire presentations just around this slide. In other words, I've done nothing else other than say my name and put up this slide, and you start to see how PCs were transactions. They didn't do anything else, whereas mobiles are personal devices, so you trust them, you bring them everywhere, they have frictionless access, they pick up Wi-Fi's and things like that. They have sensors in them, they have cameras, they send location back, they can make secure payments, they're a social platform, and they're much easier to use rather than, mainly because of apps. So they're 10 times the opportunity than PCs ever were. So that's quite sophisticated. And if I was judging a competition, about which is a good app, the app I would strongly feature and strongly support are the ones that use the technology of the mobile. And in fact, that's some of the questions that I asked the teams last year, which is to say, what are you doing with this app that you can only do with an app? And people who had a good answer to that question were companies I voted for, and teams that didn't have a good answer were companies that I had made sure to have a talk with them afterwards and say to them, look, you're not using the full technology of the mobile. You're just enabling a transaction to happen. So you need much more to look at what a mobile can do. Another kind of interesting presentation, which is also available online, you can see the link there, is Mary Meeker's Internet Trends presentation. Again, she brings it out every year, so there's one for 2016 as well, which is at the same link. But she talks about how necessity is the mother of inventions, and if you're developing a mobile app, you really need to see what they do in other countries to fully understand. The best places to look are perhaps not, Western European countries or Australia or, these kind of countries. Instead, you look at Africa, you look at poorer countries of Asia, and that's where you look at Iran, the Middle East. The biggest users of Twitter in the world are Saudi Arabia, Egypt, where, they're, for political reasons, it's not easy to do everything. Colombia, another country which has had, areas of it are closed off. So really interesting. If you want to see what mobiles are capable of doing, talk to people in these countries, or even start to read about these countries, and you start to really understand the power of mobile. In many cases, for them, the internet is mobile. They've never even seen the internet through a PC or any kind of a device. But you start to understand, payments and all the things I was talking about previously. So, in that sense, it's a lot of the really innovation in mobile is coming from Africa and Asia. Just take this as an example, and this is from the Mary Meeker presentation. So it's the Priceline app versus the C-Trip app in China. So you start to see, and I don't know if there's anyone from China on the call, but you start to see just how they do way more. There's just so much more possible through a mobile phone that C-Trip are doing rather than what Priceline are doing. And so if you're only looking at Priceline and you're judging that to be your standard, you're seriously underusing the potential of the mobile. So they have like quite amazing things, which and there's loads of examples of this. You can see another example here with again, you have this is just so much more sophisticated than even people I know who are doing quite good stuff in fashion in this part of the world in Spain. I show them this and I say, well, why aren't you doing this? Like, why aren't you studying these companies? Why aren't you looking at what they do, what they are doing, and enabling that to happen? And sometimes they'll say that, well, WeChat provides different functionality. Well, then I'm like, brilliant. The best thing you can do is find something that's working that someone doesn't have, and then start to build a path into building that. So again, the ecosystems to study are Africa and Asia, not so much France and Spain and the USA and Australia. So that's a sort of that's a quite quite a lot of homework there. But again, it's if good companies in the app space use the full potential of the mobile, and if you're not doing that, your chances of surviving are much less. So moving quite along, I'm actually at 45 minutes, but I'm going to keep going. So I'm going to kind of go 15 minutes into our questions and answers. Sorry about that, but we still have 30 minutes for questions, so there isn't any problem there, I would assume. So again, this is Benedict Evans, and this is a huge question about mobile first to mobile native. And again, there's a big difference. He talks about the idea that companies were built. For instance, our company, Hot Hotels, we are only mobile. There is no web version of our platform. You have to use the mobile. It's an app, and that's how it works. Now, so we're a mobile-first company, and we compete largely against competitors that are both have web versions of the product and were first built on the web. So they transition from, and that gives us huge advantages because they don't use half of the sophistication that is on the mobile phone. That has been, a huge reason for the success we've had. However, there is a difference now between mobile first and mobile native. In other words, I can be mobile first, but I'm not mobile native. In other words, I still, came up on the web, on the internet, and that kind of a system. So I don't fully get what to be mobile native is, but I've had to learn. So, you can read the whole article here yourself. It's quite a recent article, which makes it good, but something like Snapchat is, why has it had incredible engagement among a certain demographic? They're, the mobile natives. That's who they are. So Snapchat, it's not even possible to do Snapchat on the web. I mean, even if you wanted to, it's just not possible. There's a whole heap of things that come together on Snapchat that just aren't possible using anything other than a mobile phone. So it's a mobile native platform. Certainly a lot of the mobile first platforms, we did stuff with usability and things like that, but certainly, if we had wanted to, we could have put it on the web. So, again, my new question, judging any of you guys in a competition, I'll ask you about, are you a mobile native app? In other words, do you do things that aren't even possible on a web? Not just optimizing for mobile, but like this can only be done using the mobile phone. And again, ask yourself, if you're not doing that, then you're not using the full capability of the mobile. This is the new Uber app, and it's a long article which explains how they designed new Uber app. And of course, this is interesting because Uber have a lot of resources, so they've been able to hire some really good people to really work out, how to do this properly. And you'll start to see a lot of the design principles they've used. the things I mentioned about simplicity, taking things away, having things work in the background, all of those things I've mentioned are all covered in this article when he explains why they took decisions that they did. So again, understanding usability, UI, user interface, and also UX for user experience. Really, really important to see what they've done. Really important to see things like icons, where they put things on screen. It's a real, they don't seem to have withheld a lot of information. So really useful to understand how to design an app. And it's really great that you can access this. I mean, there was a time when you had to live in Silicon Valley, and if you didn't live in Silicon Valley, you couldn't have access to this kind of thinking, whereas now it's here. So it's I don't care where you are, whether you're in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Kazakhstan or wherever you're in Azerbaijan, you can sort of you can see what Uber are doing and read about it. This is kind of bad news in a way, but it's better you know about it than you don't know about it, which is this thing of app abandonment. And we're starting to see that the same number of big apps are dominating phones, and the idea of having standalone apps, like the kind of things you guys are building, even the kind of things we have built, are happening less and less. So people don't seem to be tolerating anymore having an app on their phone. And maybe it's for performance reasons and space reasons and things like that. But there is a huge issue of people abandoning apps. So I think that of the top 10 apps, 5 of them are from Facebook. If you think about Messenger, Instagram, and WhatsApp, they're like, so literally, and Google have 2 of them. So you're starting to see like the world congregating around about 20 apps. So you have about 20 apps that are starting to dominate the whole internet. So you have to be really careful about what you do and not have a general purpose app, because general purpose app is going to get killed. You have to have something that's really specific. In other words, something that passes the toothbrush test. And the toothbrush test is that you create something that is used every day. B-R-U-S-H-T-E-S-T. Toothbrush test. So your app should ideally pass the toothbrush test, whereby it's something that people use every day. So, maybe that is, if you have children, what time the children come out of school, something like that, that is of sufficient kind of, micro usability to you and nothing more. So in other words, sometimes it's an app that can have information on for one click instead of 4 or 5 clicks. In other words, Yahoo or Amazon or another big app, it takes them more time, whereas you have an app that, because you can provide the information in 1 click, people will find it useful. But if you don't do that, you'll find that people are going to uninstall you. So you have to be very, very specific about what you want to do, because really most people use the same apps all the time and are, almost aesthetically put off by the idea of having an app that they don't need. So that's a sort of app abandonment is a phenomenon you're going to have to deal with, and you know about, and also to deal with. This is, we'll talk a bit about app abandonment in a second, because it's actually quite a big issue. The other thing is just in terms of futurology, particularly if some of you guys are starting off, just to be aware of Facebook's 10-year roadmap, and you start to see what apps are only a small part of it. So, connectivity, artificial intelligence, and augmented reality are like the new technologies. So any apps that, any apps that can somehow connect with any of these things are very well seen. I mean, we all saw the Pokemon app. That was a good example of an app that got rapid adoption because it was using augmented reality concepts. So really, whatever it is you're trying to do, it should add something to either connectivity, AI, or VR, AR. And those are really interesting. Those are the technologies where everyone where everyone is starting to use, and really, if you have something to say and if you want to create attention, you really need to have some connection with those things. I mean, maybe you can have a kind of standalone app that just works, but if you want to do something that has a real massive scale and a global, you need to try and work out what, are you a connectivity play, an AI play, or a VR AR play? And while that might intimidate you, at least if you know what you have to do, then you can go away and find out what it is you have to do. It's not a reason for putting off. It's more a reason for understanding what it is, the nature of your challenge. The hardest thing is to find out what you need to do. Sometimes when you know you need to do it, it's possible to do it. So that's their roadmap, and Facebook is just dominating everything right now. So if they say it's important, it is important. Then you have Google, who are now claiming to be an AI company. In other words, they're not even claiming to be a mobile-first company anymore. They're an artificial intelligence company. So that's quite striking as well. This just came out in October the 4th. So that's quite recent. So Google are an artificial intelligence company, which is, quite interesting. It just shows you the size of the space and what's happening. They were previously saying that they were a mobile-first company. So they've gone to AI. They haven't even gone to mobile native. They've gone to AI. So that's quite fascinating in terms of what they're doing. It just shows the importance of AI. So we're into the questions and answer phase. Sort of a little later than expected, but what I'm going to do while you're starting to get your questions ready, and you've been over polite up with me up to now. A lot of students I have are much more aggressive, and everyone should be. I'm here to help you, and I want to get your questions and I want to answer them. And there is, I can see 18 people at least here, so everyone has a question. So what I always like to begin is to say everyone here is working in an app. So let's all start. If you could tell me about it. If you could all start to type in the box and tell me what it is you're working on, almost tell me why you're here. What's the app you're working on, and then we can start in general terms to talk about that. And then I'll start to have sort of two other slides. One is the top 10 questions I get, which if the questions are slow, I can kind of go through those. And then finally, I have the killer principles in terms of what you need to do, which many cases are a repetition of what I've said already, but it doesn't hurt. So if I could get you guys then to talk to me, thank you, Eldar. If I could get you guys to tell me about the apps you're working on, what are the ideas you have, then maybe we can start to get deeper into it. So everyone, please, who can you start to chat and tell me about your app?
Thank you, Joe, again. So,
yes, okay. Mark, who's that? Hello?
Yes, that's me. So
okay.
We got a question from Eldar.
Yeah.
So he's typing it right now.
Okay, very good. Okay, so yeah, I mean, look, even if you don't have a question, just I'm curious to know what apps you guys are working on anyway. So if you could, just even if you don't have a question, just tell me what it is you're working on. Just so that I know, is it all tourism or what kind of things are people working on? So here we go. Fine, people are starting to kick in with some questions now. So whether to develop a native mobile app or go cross-platform, what do you think? Okay, that looks like a good question. So native. I mean, this is in our case, we initially did it in iOS for Apple, and then we kind of ported that to Android, and then we wrote an Android native app. Now, the issues, of course, are first of all cost. How many programmers do you have, and those kind of things. I think we get most of our users, for whatever reason, are Apple. So we make way more money out of Apple than we do out of Android users. The other problem is that Android users are so hard to support, meaning that there's so many different flavors of Android. Some people have Samsung Galaxies, but even now you're seeing, a lot of commodity handsets. So literally Android is almost unsupportable for us. So we, in many cases, just don't have a good user experience for our Android users. We get the main ones, but within an app, because you're trying to deal with a small amount of space, very often when something is to the left or jumps to the right, then you think it loses credibility. So the answer to what we've done is that in Apple, definitely write a native. If you can, do the other things. But remember, we sell a lot of our apps to third parties, so we provide the back end, and lots of companies like Kayak, TripAdvisor, Skyscanner, all these guys, and they have the resources to really have a good user experience for Android. So that's, I guess, is my answer to the question. What do your users want? And whether there's a justification for it, whether there's a business case. If you think you have enough Android users, then by all means develop an Android app. But in our case, we haven't really seen it. We think a lot of Android users, they don't seem to have as much money as the Apple users, which I guess is not really a surprise. So I don't know, did that answer your question? But that was sort of what. 1 second now. Did I answer your question? So what else have we got? Project Runbun, mobile service for fine, easy tasks, small tasks. Okay, Andre. Yes. Okay, maybe tell me. I like that. Okay, like that's a very kind of a mobile thing to do, to find easy tasks. So are you talking about like reminders? Are you talking about reminders or services, or what are you kind of? Can you tell me a bit more about what you're doing, Andre? Project Runbun. It's like if you're too lazy, you can add task to a map. Okay, you're writing more. And your neighbors can help you. Okay. Right. So this is very good. I mean, this is the kind of things that are local. There's this thing called slow mo, which is social, local, mobile. So there's this acronym that why and hot only? Well, that's a good question. Maybe okay. Let me try and answer on hot.uk. I think probably hot.es is probably our main one that we just mapped the domain, and maybe we're not very good at the whole, shall we say, we're not. I mean, we put all our resources into making our app better because that's where the money comes from. Sometimes if we were to if we were to work on our blog and our Twitter feed doesn't have many things because we just go where the money is, and the money is in the app. So the money is so all our, instead of getting our programmers to fix our WordPress or something like that, instead of getting them to do that, instead what we do is we have them fix things in the app, which leads to money. But yeah, that's I often bring that up because I think we should blog more. I think we should tweet more. I think we should be a lot better in that stuff. But our CEO is just very strong, and he just kind of says, no, we put resources into things that make money, and then if we have time, we fix the rest. So that's a kind of a good reminder. I think I might talk to next team meeting. I'll point that out. But we tend to, hot.es is probably the thing we develop for first, and we translate the other stuff into English when there's time. But the main answer to the question is that we put resources into the app and the back end particularly. That's where most of our stuff goes in, integrating with Kaggle, with Kayak, TripAdvisor, and these kind of guys. So that's kind of what we do there. There is a reality to running a startup that resources are not infinite. You got to work on the problems that bring in you. So I just put in that thing which I'll repeat again, which is the idea of apps that are do things that are social, local, and mobile. So the idea that you can, people are lazy. So whenever I hear that people are lazy, I think, wow, that's a really cool thing. We might be able to help them with something. Very often apps are designed for people at their best, when the reality is that people are at their worst. People are lazy and inefficient and all these kind of stuff. So I think that's a sort of a good attitude. So what Runbun does is, you said lazy. If people, it's like if you are too lazy, you can add tasks to a map. So what are you saying now? Time always has a cost. Yes, yeah, but a lot of people have lots of time. That's the only thing, you don't optimize. I remember building a service for someone once. It used to take a week, and we built a service to make it take an hour. And I said to her, are you really happy? And her answer back to me was, well, I had a week, so I was quite happy to spend a week doing it. So you have to kind of be careful. You only but you're right in that some people's time is a lot more valuable than other people's time. So I mean, look, I without seeing the app, I can't go too deeply. But that's but I like what you're doing. I think that it's, as long as it's using the capability of the mobile, then that's the kind of thing I want. So something that is takes advantage of the fact that people have the mobile in their pocket, and takes advantage of the fact that we know where they are, and takes advantage of the fact that there's already trust within a local community. I mean, if you're doing that, that kind of thing is good. So okay, thanks, Andre. So just kicking in then with we have about, I'm just looking at, we have 22 minutes left. So maybe I'll kick in then with the kind of the top 10 questions I get. If anyone has a particular is dealing, I mean, look, the reality, guys, is that all of you are dealing with these problems. These are like the problems, and you should be able to have a good answer for all of these questions. Even after the webinar is over, you should take out the take off these lists, and if you can't answer these questions, then you need to talk to other people to get answers for these questions. But these are generally You know, the ones that when someone says to me, "Oh, we need an app," these are kind of the questions that I look at. So if anyone wants to sort of identify any of these questions, is struggling with it, by all means shout or type, and we can then maybe tease it out together. So where should I host the app? I mean, we just put everything. That's not true actually. I mean, we've tended to move service providers around a lot because we tended to get free. We tended to get free hosting. So you get free hosting for 6 months, and then you get free hosting to another place. But obviously, you know, AWS is or Amazon Web Services is a good option. You know, there are local alternatives, and sometimes there are data protection issues and things like that. But definitely, you know, think and have a good reason as to why you're hosting it, where you're hosting it. What's the budget? You know, is you need to sort of work out how much something should cost. Again, if kind of it doesn't, but at least you should have a target here. You should be looking at how much something costs and then relate that to how much you can sell. Who are the target users? Again, that's sort of the target users may not be the people you initially kind of start at, but you at least need to have some idea that this will be popular with young women or older men or something like that. You have to have some idea and start off looking at that. What risks are there with the app build? You know, that's everything from surging and peaking. In other words, that you have a service that has a lot of demand at a certain time. Therefore, you have to make it robust so that it doesn't crash. What are the business objectives? That's to do with the business model. You know, what are you allowing to compete? Who will the app compete with? And you know, and that is both indirect and direct competitors. Sometimes, you know, there are people who are trying to do the same service as you, but other times there's something that entertainment is a competitor. So something that's completely separate. In other words, if you're building a game, then you know almost anything competes with someone's time. The data points that your client will need from an app. This is everything from you know, location data and stuff like that. So you know, when you're installing an app, you have to tell the user to get permission to do certain things. So make very careful what you're doing and why you want this information and where that's stored. That can often be very valuable. Some companies, particularly with machine learning, you know, we have 4 years worth of data about our customers, which is extremely valuable to any machine learning company. Monetization strategy for the app, you know, how to make people buy, whether they buy the app itself or whether they buy within the app. I mean, most people use freemium and then upgrade to premium services, but that may not be the case. And maybe you have something that's valuable enough to get one big ticket. You just get a small number of people to pay $10 rather than having a lot of people to pay. How will they buy? That is to do with banking and you know what payment services you support. We use Stripe for almost everything. We find them very good. You know, again, depends what country you're in. But as far as I know, Stripe, you can do it from almost any country. But they've been really good in terms of things like fraud and those kind of problems. And then finally, what dependencies are there? And that's to do with what you connect, you know, API, you know, XML, even App Store, you know, and Google Play. So, you know, very often our app goes down to do it, nothing to do with us. In other words, or well, maybe not the app goes down, but it doesn't connect to other services because they've done an upgrade. So again, the easier you can keep it, the less chance there is of stuff going wrong, which is why we don't connect to any cab companies or any airlines or anything like that. We keep our app as simple as possible because simplicity scales. Simplicity scales, complex, COMPLEXITY kills. So that's actually scales. So simplicity scales, complexity kills. So we want to have an app that can go into 55 countries and 300 cities, and we can add on other countries without having, dead links and things like that. That's sort of, what we do all the time. So let me try and answer some questions. So how to make an app popular globally? Well, that's an easy question. If there was an easy answer, I could charge myself out as a consultant for like, whatever, 200,000 an hour. All I can say is that you need to try and connect with things that are already popular globally. So you need to find a way to connect to things that are already popular, because that's where the people are. It's really hard to make people from a standing start. So you have to try and find something that's really popular and then connect with it. What would be a good start? Well, get a celebrity is always the way to do it. There's a story told about how Angry Birds got popular. That it was like a Swedish skier went on after an injury on the television and said she planned to spend 3 days playing Angry Birds. So, once you have something that works, you need to try and use things like stunts, which are to draw the attention. But make sure your app works first, because good marketing will kill your app. In other words, if your app isn't up to the demand and things like that, you kind of get one chance to make a good first impression. So we don't use any Facebook installs or Twitter promoted tweets or anything like that. We just think that's like a drug, and then you get caught buying AdWords and installs and all this kind of stuff, and then you can't switch it off. So we don't do any paid advertising. What we try and do is use APIs to connect to travel, and then also just work really well with what we know is working. In other words, it isn't just connecting to Kayak, and it isn't just connecting to Skyscanner. It's also, when we're there, trying really, really hard to try and make sure we come up as the first options. So, in other words, price optimization, things like that. So, in effect, we have, apart from our app, we kind of have 5 big customers we work with all the time, but we try and get deeper and deeper with each of those 5. So it isn't a question of going from 5 to 10 or 5 to 20. It's a question of going deeper within Kayak, deeper within Skyscanner, deeper within, the Trivago, the people we work with. More countries, more formats. There's an awful lot of complexity in terms of the way they do their feeds. A company like Skyscanner or Trivago, there's more information that can be got all the time from them, and then you can make adjustments so that you show up. So when somebody says Hotel Barcelona, that we're in the top 5 sections. How to do that. So we put our time on trying to make that happen, rather than connecting with other platforms, because we think that takes a long time for people to get to know you and trust you and that kind of thing. So we prefer to go deeper with the people we have an existing experience with. So that's the kind of thing. But it's very hard. Discovery is hard because, there's a small number of apps completely dominate the world, and people tend to maybe try you out, but then uninstall you very quickly. All I can say is try and have something local. And that can often be an interesting thing. Something identifies some piece of information that big guys are not that really interested in, and they'll leave that space clear for you, and that can then start you. And then once you get some attention, you can start to add other things. But you need to get, you don't want to do what's called premature scaling. No, M-A-T-U-R-E scaling, whereby that's putting resources into the app before it's ready, before you really know what the customers want, and that's extremely important not to do that. You need to know what it is about your app that customers like and what it is they're prepared to pay for. There you go. So we have that's kind of my, I don't know, did I answer your question? Did I answer your question? ANSWR, your question? Yeah. It's, you know, just case studies, case studies, case study. There's lots of examples out there. You know, Uber. There's a really good Facebook's growth team is another. There's a lot of examples on YouTube. I mean, just even if you go to YouTube and just put in like how to grow, how to monetize apps, you know, there are some good videos out there. There are obviously some people who don't know what they're talking about, but the one on Facebook growth is really interesting, where the guy explains exactly how it was they grew, you know, the idea of getting 8 customers within 5 days, and they looked at establishing metrics, how Uber grew, how Airbnb, Facebook, these kind of people. So there's a lot of case studies out there, and very often you just need to put up the time to find them. And again, the internet is wonderful. The internet makes these things available when there was a time when you had to be living physically in the place to get this information. So it's, let me see. You shared some interesting presentations. Can you please share, maybe add some extra resources for a good read? Okay. I'm wondering where, yeah, I mean, in my presentation there was let me see. I'll see if I can get some more resources and then send them out. And I know, one second now, I'll just go on to, I'll just go, open my browser and see if I can get, well, one second now. I know once I start opening, let me see. Facebook growth team video, Stanford. This starts to get a bit annoying now when I'm on a webinar and I'm also trying to search the web. Stanford, Stanford, YouTube. So let's sort of see. Here you go. This is what I like. I found
oversold. Thank you. Cool.
So this is really interesting. For a second, I'll just pull this up. Whoops. I think I have. Hopefully, I haven't lost my. Here we go. So this is really good. For instance, this is all about how Facebook grew. This is the one I'm talking about, and you hear like there's a very distinct, very distinct methodology behind what they did. You know, there was nothing random about it. The companies that succeeded, you know, weren't just lucky; they had a plan. So so that's one thing I would recommend for you to go through and look at that, and you see how Facebook grew, and then that's kind of that's sort of interesting. But there's new things coming along all the time. So again, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, and then send me an email, I'll send you some further links. How about that? Is that okay, Eldar? Connect with me on LinkedIn, and then I'll send you some more links. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. So this is basically almost my last slide. I'll actually so a lot of this is repeating what I've covered before, but repetition is good. LinkedIn is dead. Well, in Russia, actually, it is. That's funny. I never thought about that. Anyway, any good Russian will be able to work out a way around LinkedIn. Anyway, look, use Twitter then, or whatever you're allowed to use. Or whatever. There's enough stuff there between. There's my email address. I'm a big LinkedIn user, but I know what you mean. But LinkedIn, or could be on Twitter, or Tumblr is my blog, or else Snapchat. That's where you find me. But look, I think email me if you want links and I'll send you a couple. So let me just, for the sake of completeness, if nothing else, just run through my five principles for developing a market disruptor app. Okay, I'm on Facebook as well, actually. So, but Facebook is mostly kind of personal stuff rather than anything else. But if LinkedIn doesn't work in Russia, then I guess we have to use Facebook. Okay, so my last 5 principles then. So first thing is this idea of build what people need. Work doesn't automatically result in anything. If you're building what people, if you're not building what people need, then you won't get anywhere. So your job in a startup is to try and find out. Your job is to try and find out what it is people need. So you build a minimum viable product, experiment, listen to customer reactions, make changes, then test those. So, but I can't emphasize enough to you that if you're working hard to do the wrong thing, that's the biggest waste of time in the world. Don't do anything that doesn't kind of work. That's just a waste of time. So your job when you're doing an app is to build something people will need in a world that, there's lots of distractions. Simplicity versus functionality. This idea of taking away things that rather than adding things. So the temptation is always to add things rather than to take away things. But you want to make things as simple as possible. Simplicity is what scales. So the conversation is not like, oh, why don't we add something? The conversation is, why don't we take away what we have in order to highlight, what works. And there's a presentation. Let's see if I can find it from as trainer. So this is just finding. So this is very good as well. I'm just pulling this up. So a lot of people find this presentation really equal to use. This is another good presentation that a lot of people find good to use. So the idea of like when something is working, highlighting it, bringing it up to the front screen, bringing it to the top of the front screen, rather than taking away. So when you find out the thing that's working, you pushing that. Leverage what already exists. Is the idea of why build password capability if you just get people to use Facebook logins. Why even build Android apps if you can just connect to people who already have Android apps? So all the time, look at connecting to things that already exists. Why build payment functionality if you can get that payment functionality? So all the time, do the minimum of what you can do and try to find something that's already out there rather than being a hero and building it yourself. And number 4, keep costs down, improve the model first. I guess what that means is that it takes a long time. I mean, we're 4 years doing this, and the first 18 months, it just took a long time. By definition, all entrepreneurs are way ahead of everybody else. And this is my 6th company I founded, so I know a bit about how to do this. But still, it takes a long time. So you need to keep your costs down. The other thing is there's seasonality. You sell a lot more hotel rooms in the summer, for instance, and there's sometimes some parts of the year where no matter how good your product is, you're not really going to sell very much. So you just have to accept that. So, prepare to have enough money to last much longer than you expect. And don't put lots of money into scaling until the model is proven. If 7 out of 10 users aren't using what you're providing, then it hasn't got enough engagement, and you have to keep on refining until you get it. And finally, it's be agile and learn fast. In other words, it's not about proving yourself to be right or anything like that. In fact, it's the opposite. It's about being flexible enough to move what you're doing, and that's so. I just turned on in the end just to sort of see what I look like, and bit of excitement. So here's my can of Red Bull that got me through the session. And this is what I look like, and my office looks like, and all of that. So just to see that I'm a real person. And now we turn off the camera because it's quite enough of that. And so I think that's the end. That's the end. So many books. Yeah, I am a professor, I am a professor, so the books. But that's the end. I hope that was useful, and thank you. I know people in Russia can't connect with me on LinkedIn, but there's other ways to connect with me, and here are my contact details as well. And if I can help you, that's useful, and maybe I'll see some of you guys in Barcelona. Anyone have anything to say to finish off? Thanks, Tanya. Anyone else got anything?
We're getting people.
Is that Mark? Okay.
Yeah, that's me who's speaking.
Okay, right. Good. Okay, well, I'll say good. Okay, I guess. Well, I'll wait while everyone's saying thank you. That's nice, and all that kind of thing. I'm getting asked football questions as well. I support Arsenal. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's the team I support. And you can never change your football team. I'm only living in Madrid for 12 years, so I lived around other parts of the world before that. So I don't support either of the Madrid teams. So.
All right, everyone. Well, again, for a lovely session. We'll have another session this coming Thursday. It'll be in Russian, so please stay tuned for an email coming from us shortly in the coming day with today's recording of Joe's session and details about our next session.
Brilliant. Okay then. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Goodbye. Bye.